This video is learning target 9 in the evolution unit. We'll be talking about genetic equilibrium. And so before we discuss this concept, I want to review quickly how natural selection works. Again, natural selection has 4 principles: overpopulation, that populations will overproduce; variations are created in a population, they exist in a population, and because there's variation, because there's an overpopulation, there will be a struggle for existence. Not everyone is going to have the same adaptations to survive. Therefore, there will be differential reproductive success. Only the most fit organisms, the one whose variations work the best, will survive to the next generation. I think this picture shows that well. You can just think of an example. Let's say perhaps here in LBL, we have a situation where here's some sort of ancestral deer. Well, let's say that the temperature in Western Kentucky drops 20 degrees on average. That would mean we would have some really cold winters. Well, there's 3 variations that exist in these deer. You have deer with really thin coats, you have deer with medium coats, and you have deer with thick coats. All right. Well, what's going to happen? Well, the ones with the really thin coats are going to die off, like you see here, because they're not fit for the new winters. And so natural selection depends on death, the death of those the least fit. And so the ones that are fit continue on. More variations arise for different reasons. So maybe the temperature drops another 10 degrees. And so even the medium coats are going to be not warm enough in the winter, and they're going to die off as well. And so what do you have happening here is the population of deer in Western Kentucky all have really thick coats because the temperature has dropped, and because only those with the thickest coats have survived in order to move on. This is essentially the way evolution works. There's a change in the allele frequencies. We're going to be looking at that more so in this video. And we would say that that is microevolution, small changes within a population. These small changes are going to lead to better adaptations, which leads to more fitness. It took small changes to get from a wolf to a Dalmatian. A wolf did not have a Dalmatian one day and we picked it out and said we like the way this dog looks. It took lots of generations to get to a spotted dog. Probably took less generations to get to the German Shepherd. Now, that's artificial selection. That's where we actually pick the traits we like. So you can imagine how much longer this process is going to take when it's just being done naturally. And so these small changes add up over time, and then you have bigger changes called macroevolution. These are large changes that lead to the creation of a new species or a new taxon or group category. This does not happen without microevolution over the course of many generations. So it's a bit of a red herring to say that, well, I think that microevolution works, but macroevolution doesn't. Well, you really can't have one without the other. And so this picture here is an artist rendition of what perhaps the first amphibian looked like. Tiktaalik was its name. And it has adaptations that will allow it to live on land, whereas its previous ancestors, fish, would not be able to. Notice, it's got these nostrils, it's able to breathe air. It's able to, probably has lungs on the inside too, some sort of modified lung on the inside or modified swim bladder. It's also able to pick itself up off the mud with those limbs. That's the things that are going to make it be able to live out of water, be able to get away from prey out of water and live, be fit for the new environment. Amphibians move to reptiles. Reptiles are able to live out of the water, and then you have the movement from reptiles to mammals. Here you see that. These reptiles that kind of led to mammals are called therapsids, and it has to do with their skull, which we won't talk about, but you can see these reptiles are more mammal-like than, say, a lizard that lives flat on the ground, or a snake even, or a crocodile. They have different structure. Well, these mammal-like reptiles eventually led to our mammals today, which led to us. And so these small changes over time, because of change in fitness, change in surroundings leading to different adaptations, and you have these big changes that occur. And this is the term called speciation. Speciation is the formation of a new species. And this is happening anytime these changes lead to a new species, and we'll define species in a second. This is called speciation. There are two kinds of speciation, which we'll define in a later video: allopatric and sympatric speciation. So what is a species? A species is a group of similar organisms that reproduce to create fertile offspring. Fertile meaning they're able to reproduce also. They are viable offspring. An example here, this is a mule. A mule is not a species. It cannot reproduce to make more mules. It is sterile. A horse and a donkey. A horse and a horse can make more horses. A horse and a donkey and a donkey can make more donkeys. A horse and a donkey make a mule, and a mule can't make more mules because a mule is not a species. It is sterile. And so there are examples of this. You know, the mythical liger, and maybe the lonely donkey, and other examples of this, of these hybrids that are sterile. And so you don't see this in nature so much, um, but we do create these hybrids. For instance, mules are just good workers, and so they've been made for a long time. But a species is when organisms can reproduce and make fertile offspring, offspring that are also able to reproduce. And so on this idea of speciation, speciation occurs ultimately because the change in a gene pool over time. These small microevolution changes. Well, what is a gene pool? A gene pool is all of the genes in a given population. See this population of pigs here, and they have different genes. They have different genotypes: homozygous dominant, recessive, heterozygous. But all of those genes represent the gene pool of that population. And there are allele frequencies in this population as well. And it's a change in these allele frequencies which represents evolution. And so the relative frequencies of alleles is the frequency of a particular allele in the population. So let's look at this population of bugs here on the left. And so on the left here you have 6 bugs. 3 of them are brown, 3 of them are green. We can tell by looking at this that brown is dominant. And so what kind of alleles do we have? Well, we have 2 little ones here. We have a big one here. Little, 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 little. Brown is dominant because this bug's brown. It's got a little green. The green doesn't show. So we got this here, this here. All right. Well, how many big bees do we have? How many dominant alleles do we have in the population? We have 12 total alleles, 6 bugs, 2 alleles each, 12 total alleles. We have 3 out of 12 big bees, or 25%, meaning that we have 9 out of 12, or 75%, little bees. Well, fast forward 100 generations, and what's going on? Well, those frequencies have changed. So what has this population done? In a small way, this population has evolved. Maybe a real small change like this, you would say, it's random, nothing really happened. But if it was a large change, let's say we have 20% change, where green is 55 and brown is 45, and so we've had that big of a change, we would probably say something has happened in this environment to make brown more survivable or more fit in the population. And so these ideas led these 2 men, Party and Weinberg. You'll only ever see their names together like that. And so first names and dates and things are there, but you don't have to know them. Just Hardy-Weinberg. And they came up with what's called the Hardy-Weinberg principle of genetic equilibrium. And what genetic equilibrium is, well, there's the Hardy-Weinberg principle if you're really fascinated with that, but you can kind of skip over that. But what genetic equilibrium is when there are no new changes in a population over time. Essentially, a population at genetic equilibrium is not evolving. So take this population of pigs. There are 15 pigs here, 4 of which are black, 11 of which are pink. Well, let's just say in 10,000 years we come back and this same population of pigs is here, maybe distant ancestors. However, we still have a ratio of 4 out of 15 black, 11 out of 15 pink. We would say that that population has not evolved. Nothing is causing that population to change over time. And so what Hardy Weinberg said is that in order for genetic equilibrium to occur, these 5 conditions must be present. Population must be large, meaning that if it's a small population, any change is going to be readily apparent. It's going to show. So population has to be large. 10,000 individuals, if one changes, there's no real difference. Random mating, meaning that there's no reason for one to select, or for a mate to select one individual over another. The opposite of this is like with bears fighting each other, and the strongest bear in the woods gets to mate. In this case, everybody gets to mate, and there's no reason to select one mate over another. It's completely random. No migration into or out of a population. There's no new individuals coming in, no individuals leaving, and so no changes in that way. No mutations, so there's no changes in the DNA at all. And lastly, there's no natural selection, meaning that every individual has an equal chance to survive. There's no limitations on resources. There's no limitations at all. And so every individual has an equal chance to survive. And so what can we say about this Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium? It doesn't really work. It's a real thing. However, it doesn't exist in nature because these 5 traits are always at odds one way or another. Maybe more than one of them, maybe several of them. Maybe one population of individuals on Earth currently meets these 5 standards, and that would be humans. Humans arguably are not changing that much because we kind of meet these 5 conditions in one way or another. But again, that's debatable. But the idea is that in nature, this is not real. Genetic equilibrium does not exist. Populations are changing over time.